Okay, what is up there, YouTube? This is J-Man Time, and today I have a video on another rare series of battle rifles / assault rifles that were developed during the era or the late period of the Soviet Union. And these weapons here are very strange in a different way, as these weapons are considered recoilless or recoil-reduced assault rifles and battle rifles that were developed by a almost forgotten late Soviet arms developer or gunsmith by the name of Baryshev Anatoly Filipovich in the mid to late 1980s. And these weapon systems are known as the Baryshev AVB 7.62mm weapons, battle rifles, and assault rifles that were developed between 1985 and 1991 towards the very end of the Soviet Union. Baryshev Anatoly Filipovich was a Soviet gunsmith who is almost completely forgotten, but he developed some of the most advanced, but kind of impractical in a sense, recoil-reduced or reduced to recoil, sometimes referred to as recoilless battle rifles and assault rifles, but also grenade launchers that were developed in the 80s and early 1990s. And these were a series of rifles and machine gun projects developed during this 5 to 6 year time period. Now, the first weapon that he developed was known as the Baryshev AVB 7.62mm, and this was actually a battle rifle that was developed to replace or substitute the pre-existing SVD Dragunov rifles that were already being used in the Soviet Army at the time. Now, keep in mind, the Dragunov is used both as a semi-automatic sniper weapon and also as a battle rifle to an extent by some Soviet Unions. And this weapon here, the AVB 7.62, was a fully automatic battle rifle, whereas the Dragunov was a semi-automatic rifle. This weapon here weighed about 8 pounds or 3.9 kilograms and was chambered for the standard Soviet 7.62 by 54mm rim cartridge and could fire from the same 10-round magazines as the SVD Dragunov. This weapon system had a rate of fire of 750 rounds per minute and could hit targets accurately at 800 meters. It was also fitted with a 20-round box magazine on some variants. But what made this weapon stand out was its firing system, or its action. It used a delayed blowback, shutter-free or semi-shutter-free system, recoil-reducing system that made the weapon have almost no heavy or medium level recoil when firing on fully automatic mode. Keep in mind, this rifle was a select fire battle rifle, so you could fire on both semi-automatic and fully automatic. Now, the problem with fully automatic 7.62 by 54mm firearms is that they had a very heavy recoil. This is one of the reasons why the World War II vintage Soviet AVT-40, a select fire version of the SVT-40, was later taken out of service at the end of World War II. The Soviets had produced about 1.5 million AVT-40s during World War II, along with the SVT-40 series of semi-automatic rifles. And the Russians would never adopt a 7.62 by 54mm rimmed fully automatic select fire battle rifle again for the remainder of the Soviet Union. This weapon system here, the AVB 7.62, was meant to be the AVT-40 of the late Soviet era. But the weapon was never adopted for one reason, and one reason only: accuracy. The recoil system of this weapon, the delayed blowback semi-shutter-free system, made the weapon somewhat inaccurate when compared to other 7.62 and 54mm rimfire rifles or calibered rifles like the aforementioned SVD Dragunov, which was also used as a sniper rifle or primarily used as a sniper rifle or marksman weapon by the Soviet Red Army. That reason alone is why the 7.62 by 54mm experimental version of this rifle was never adopted, although at least a few hundred variants were produced and tested by the Soviet Union between 1985 and 1991, before the collapse of the Union. Now, Filipovich would create several more variants of this weapon. He also created a 7.62 by 51mm NATO calibered version, also in the 1980s. This variant was known as the AVB 7.62mm LCZ B20, also known in Czechoslovakia. Yes, there was a Czech variant known as the CZW 7.62mm, and this version was produced experimentally in the 1980s and early 1990s, but was showcased again later on in the early 2010s, about 2013-2014, in Czechoslovakia, later known as the Czech Republic. Filipovich also developed a 7.62 by 39mm variant known as the AB 7.62, which was also unveiled a second time in the early 2010s as the LCZ B10. And there was also a 5.45mm version also developed during the late Cold War era. And all of these variants were tested by the Soviet Union between 1985 and 1991, and they were all rejected for basically the same reason: accuracy. The delayed blowback semi-free shutter system just made the weapon somewhat inaccurate, or a little bit too much inaccurate when compared to the weapon systems they were designed to replace, like the aforementioned SPD Dragunov and the AK-47/AKM and the AK-74, which was the standard issued assault rifle of the Soviet Union towards the very end of the Union between 1975 and 1991. So overall, the system itself is what led to this weapon system, or this weapons project, being abandoned. Now, the concept of a reduced recoiled fully automatic battle rifle is a very good idea, and in fact, other Soviet arms developers tried the same thing. You also had the Nikonov series of select fire battle rifles / assault rifles. They were also in development at the same time, and those weapon systems used a burst fire system, but also had some delayed recoil systems added to it. But this system here was the most effective at having a reduced recoil. If you watch actual footage of these weapons being tested, you will notice that these weapons have significantly less recoil than both the SPD Dragunov and the AKM and AK-74 series of rifles that they were designed to replace. But overall, that accuracy, the lack of accuracy, is what doomed this weapon system. Now, later on, during the later Soviet period, we're talking like 1989 to 1991, and even into the early 1990s, Filipovich also developed 2 more weapon systems that used the same system. And these weapon systems were known as the KPB 12.7, which was a 50 caliber version of this weapon system, but using a top-fed magazine, and the ARGB 85, which was a grenade launcher, a 30mm grenade launcher that fired the standard VOG 17 rounds used by the ASG 17 fully automatic grenade launcher, was also used by the Soviet Union. It is still used by the Army of the Russian Federation. But those weapon systems were also rejected, but the KPB 12.7mm and the ARGB 85 were used to very limited extent during the Chechen wars of the 1990s and early 2000s. There are actually photographs of some of the Russian special forces being issued with a limited production series of both the KPB 12.7 and the ARGB 85, 12.7mm 50 caliber rifle and 30mm grenade launcher, automatic grenade launcher. So it's not like these weapon systems didn't see any combat. In fact, even some of the battle rifles and assault rifles that were produced for testing were also used during the Chechen wars of the 1990s and early 2000s. So these weapon systems actually did see some very, very limited use in combat in Chechnya in the 90s and 2000s. But overall, these weapon systems were never produced in any large quantity, and they are very rare and very hard to find. There are very few of these weapons that are even up for sale for anywhere in Russia itself, let alone outside of Russia. And these weapon systems here were pretty much some of the rarest Soviet weapons developed towards the end of the Soviet era. the Baryshev AVB 7.62mm select fire battle rifles and assault rifles, and the KPB 12.7 and ARGB 85 series of 50 caliber rifles and 30mm automatic grenade launchers that were developed between 1985 and the early 1990s, 1990 through 1991. So what do you all think of these rare Soviet reduced recoil or recoilless weapons or fully automatic rifles and grenade launchers that were developed at the end of the Cold War? Which of these were your favorite? Obviously, the first gun on the list, the AVB 7.62, is my favorite, as the AVT-40 and SPD Dragunov are some of my favorite Soviet weapons, and this weapon system here was designed to supersede those weapon systems overall. So what do you all think of these? Please tell me in the comments section below, and until next time, this was J-Man Time, signing off.